Good afternoon, everyone. This is Susan McGuire, and I'm Director of Professional Development here at ACCE, and I'm really happy to welcome you to this afternoon's webinar, which will be presented by Chris Romer, who is President and CEO of the Vail Valley Partnership. Our webinar today is the first in our From the Winner's Circle series, which features 2020 winners of our Chamber of the Year Award. This afternoon, Chris will be presenting on the Vail Valley Workforce Housing Coalition, which brings together public and private partners to identify opportunities and needs and share thoughts, feedback, and solutions to address workforce housing issues. So we're really happy to have Chris here today, and we are also delighted to have with us here today the sponsor of ACCE's Chamber of the Year Award program, Mark Edgley of MemberClicks. Mark will be providing some introductory remarks, and I will turn the program over to you just as soon as I've reviewed a few housekeeping matters. So first, as usual, attendees are in listen-only mode to avoid background noise. Second, after the presentation, we will have time for questions, and you can ask questions by typing them into the question box, which is on the lower right-hand corner of your webinar panel. Just type in your question, and when Chris is done with his presentation, I will make sure he gets the questions and we'll get them answered. And be sure to type in those questions as soon as you think of them. You don't have to wait till the end. Type them in as they come to you during Chris's presentation, and we'll handle those at the end. I also have the presentation slides uploaded to the webinar panel on the bottom right-hand corner. So if you click on the gray box labeled Handouts, open up that box, click on the handout, you will see his presentation. I'm also recording the webinar, and I will post the recording and the webinar slides on our webinar page, and that will be up no later than Monday, March 1st, and hopefully earlier. So with that, I'm going to turn the program over briefly to Mark Edgley. Again, he's President and CEO of MemberClicks. We are very grateful to MemberClicks for their generous sponsorship of the ACCE Chamber of the Year program. So welcome and thank you, Mark, and I will give you the stage.
Thank you, Susan. I really appreciate it. This is the least impressive stage that I've ever, probably you've seen for those of you that are at home. I really am excited to be here today just to kind of introduce things. That's really my only role. So I'm the least important person here. You guys are the most important person here. And MemberClicks' mission is to empower member-based organizations to thrive through refreshing technology and a heart for service. That's our mission, and the reason why we take it so seriously is for the very reason that we're talking today. Chris and his team at the Vail Valley Chamber of Commerce, we want them to focus on workforce housing or driving business in the area or helping equip small businesses who have been hurt over the last 15 months because of a pandemic to be focused on that. Because that is essentially what chambers are designed to do. We want to provide the technology to help empower you to do that. And then we want to equip it with, a heart for service. So when you call in and you do have problems and you do have questions, that you've got somebody on the line there. And so that's what MemberClicks is all about. We just want to simplify your technology. We want to make it easy for you to engage your members. We want to make it to where you can stay focused on all the initiatives, like one that Chris is going to share with you today that's made his chamber so successful. And it would be remiss if I didn't say that, Chris, it doesn't look like Vail in your background right now. It looks like Florida, so MemberClicks is incredibly honored to be the sponsor of the Chamber of the Year Award. It's always something we really look forward to, especially when we're in the in-person event and we get to watch the people, parade across the stage. And Chris has gotten to do that before, and he understands the work that goes into that. And so I'm sure today's content will be great. So thank you for being here. Thank you for giving me a brief second to share with you what MemberClicks is all about and how we would love to do business with you and engage with you so that you can help grow your chamber, every step of the way over the coming months and years. So, Susan, thanks a lot. I'll pass it back to you. And Chris, I appreciate you doing what you're doing today.
Okay. Thanks so much, Mark. And again, we really appreciate your sponsorship and making this award program possible. So at this point, I'm going to introduce Chris. Chris is President and CEO of the Vail Valley Partnership, which is the regional chamber of commerce and economic development organization representing Vail Valley, Colorado, and it was named Chamber of the Year in 2016 and 2020 by ACCE. In his role, Chris leads the partnership team to help positively impact the community. He's a graduate of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation's Institute for Organization Management, is a WACE accredited chamber executive. He's been named a top 20 mind in hospitality sales, marketing, and revenue management by Hospitality Sales and Marketing Association International. And he's also been named Chamber Executive of the Year by the Colorado Association of Commerce and Industry Colorado Chamber Executives. He dedicates his time to a variety of volunteer boards, including the Western Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives, Colorado Mountain College, and many others. And he served as a governor appointee to the Brand Colorado Council, the Colorado Tourism and Outdoor Recreation Key Industry Steering Network, and the governor's COVID Recovery Task Force. So thank you, Chris, for being with us today. Congratulations on your win, and I will hand the presentation over to you.
Wonderful, and thank you, Susan, and thank you, Mark. We appreciate ACCE so much for everything they do for the industry, and appreciate Member Clicks for their support of the Chamber of the Year program and the industry and everything they do for all of us. So thank you for that introduction. It's the least important part of the conversation today. The real crux of this is hopefully to allow you who are tuning in and watching this maybe on demand afterwards as you consider whether or not you will apply for the Chamber of the Year program. It give you a case study of how and why we went through the process and how we chose to spotlight our Workforce Housing Coalition as one of our key synopsis. So hopefully you can learn from this. I think that as we kick off here, you know, the general mission and one of the things we strive for here at Vail Valley Partnership, and all of your chambers do as well, is to help businesses grow and communities thrive. That's a general mission statement that it could be applied to most any chamber of commerce. Everyone's doing great things in their communities, and how do you take that and apply it to your programs, and how do you take that and apply it to your Chamber of the Year application, and really consider what is it that you're doing to help business grow and communities thrive. So at Vail Valley Partnership, and again, similar to many of your organizations, I don't know that we are necessarily unique in this approach, but I think it's worth covering and talking about, because I think it, again, builds the foundation for, are you living your brand promise? For us, our tagline is to support, unite, and lead. Within that, this will manifest itself in the Workforce Housing Coalition case study that we'll share. But within the idea of support local businesses devoted to making our community a great place to live and work and raise families, just like you are in your communities. We seek to build stronger community. Unite. How do you be a convener? How do you unite key stakeholders? We like to think that we excel at bringing together leaders and influencers from throughout the community. And the key part here is to make things happen. We'll talk about that in this case study as well. And third is to lead. Maybe that could otherwise be looked at as a champion for a stronger community, a catalyst to get things done. But we lead collaborative efforts. We stand up for what we believe in. We're willing to fight for what's right, again, with the idea that businesses can grow and communities can thrive. One of the things that we really focus on is to be a community problem solver. How do we at the Chamber, at Vail Valley Partnership, step up to face the greatest challenges in our communities? How do we tackle the issues that impact our business community? In our case, as many of yours across the country, is workforce housing. Maybe it's transit and transportation and workforce development. How do we help our members and contribute to the vitality of our entire region? a quick snapshot on a little bit about us. This is pulled from our actual application, 91% retention rate. This was for 2019. In 2020, it was actually a little bit higher than that. We have about a 35% market penetration, just over 900 members, and 10 different signature programs that manifest themselves in some of the key areas I talked about before: serving business and helping our businesses grow, leadership programs, et cetera, et cetera. You can find all of that information on our website at vailvalleypartnership.com and dive into the details on our About Us page or any of our program pages. But just a little bit of a snapshot to tee us up as we look into the topic today. And what you're tuned into is our Workforce Housing Coalition. Again, this was one of our synopsis that we provided as part of our application that we wanted to share with you today to give you a good example of the types of things that I think the judges are looking for in terms of your Chamber of the Year application. So for us, housing and workforce housing has been a long-term issue. It's been an issue for a long, long time. It was an issue before the Great Recession. It was an issue during the Great Recession and after the Great Recession. I pulled this quote from our annual workforce study and workforce survey because I think it just manifests exactly the issues that we face here. And you can read the quote there, but the gist of it being frustration with housing is a long time issue. It's been an issue for a long decades in our community. There's never been an effort that coalesced and brought together everyone who is in this. We know that it faced our business community. We have any number of surveys and business retention and expansion programs, community surveys, workforce studies, town-driven studies, county-driven studies. Housing is always number one on the list and has remained that way through different economic cycles and everything else. This quote really manifests itself and helped lead to our why, on why we developed the Workforce Housing Coalition. So our effort and what we really sought to do was to take action from the research studies and surveys and information, and really, instead of wringing our hands and saying and just beating the table around this is an issue, do something, this is an issue, do something, we said what impact can we have to actually bring together public partners and private partners? How can we identify needs? How can we facilitate a process that allows us to share our thoughts and our feedback, and most importantly, our solutions to meaningfully address the issue? So the Workforce Housing Coalition was designed to help identify regulatory burdens, to identify what is the right mix of rental units and ownership mix. How do we facilitate potential private industry solutions? And what is the role of our public partners? With regards to ACCE and the Horizons study, this really manifests itself as a political and social fragmentation. How does the chamber play that same center in facilitating this type of project to get things done? We had numerous public meetings, and we'll talk about both of these, including the NIMBY Jamboree and the YIMBY Jamboree. For those not familiar, NIMBY, not in my backyard, and YIMBY, yes, in my backyard. So we'll talk about those in example. We're really excited to share that this effort helped result, and the key word helped. We didn't build any units. We didn't build housing apartment complexes and other things, but I think we did help coalesce the community to get 11 projects approved since 2016. From 2016 through 2019, we got 11 projects approved, and I would note in the 10 years prior that 0 projects with workforce housing were approved. So we saw really, really good momentum from the initiation of this project. So a little bit of background. I mentioned a lot of the research and data and studies that we have done. And I just want to lay this groundwork because I think it's important as to our why. You can see here employers and households saying that housing was the most critical or one of the most serious problems, or at least a moderate problem. So everyone recognizes, and truly almost everyone, every employer and everyone but maybe 1% of households recognize that workforce housing was a significant or at least a problem in our community. And when we look at how this manifested itself over the past 20 years, we see the wage median income is the blue line at the bottom, and there'd been moderate, slight increase in the median income. But look at the median sales price of homes. It almost doubled in that time frame. So the gap between the income and the sales price, and thus the affordability of housing, really became a big issue, and needed the chamber really to be the group to coalesce that through. And when we look at our role as a chamber being a voice for business, and the role that the chamber plays in helping get things done, these are some slides that are taken directly from our workforce study. And again, really manifest and build on the slides we saw earlier. But this background in data to help express why we did this initiative, I think that's an important learning process for everybody as you go through your Chamber of the Year process, is to not just share what you did, which is obviously very, very important, but share why. Share the information and the data that got you to the point of doing your program, of doing your whatever it is you're sharing in your synopsis, but share why it's important to your stakeholders. Why is it important to your community? Why is it important to your members? In our case, you can see the employee experience on the top slide there, and then the employer experience, the business experience. And you see really a huge majority of both employees and employers have said for years, dating back to the recession and coming out of the recession, that housing was still an issue and on their radar screen, and increasingly so the further we get away from the Great Recession. So, goals and objectives. What is it that we sought to do? And then we'll dive into the details and the tactics that we did. Obviously, every chamber wants to ensure that your community can be competitive and remain competitive, and you want to support your businesses. Again, I'll let you guys read through this, but we built an entire white paper around housing, and we engaged people through our surveys and everything else. But we really wanted to strive to provide business-friendly solutions and be the conduit to help people get to yes. So how do you work with landowners, elected officials, developers, the general public? When we set forth with the Workforce Housing Coalition, we really wanted to set SMART goals. SMART, you're all familiar with, I expect, specific, increase housing inventory through the role that we can play, which is education and advocacy. Measurable, measured by the number of approved projects and new units developed. Achievable, we achieved 11 projects approved from the start of the coalition. Obviously relevant because housing is the top pain point for our businesses, and time sensitive. Housing in our community is a crisis, and the work is ongoing. We will never realistically solve this problem in Eagle County and in our community, but we will continue to work at it. We will continue to advocate. We'll continue to bring these things forward. And again, the public policy and community and social impact as it relates to the Chamber of the Year application. So we internally within our staff and our board said, what can we do? We came up with the idea of the Workforce Housing Coalition as a collaborative approach. How do we work with all the folks who touch housing, and what can we do? So we started by doing a crowdsourcing model. We brought folks together and brainstormed different topics and ideas. We spent a couple hours together. We were very intentional about engaging our audience to help us determine what are the next steps. So folks were able to select different topics that they wanted to go to. We had 8 or 10 different topics for folks to discuss. Then we had folks come up to the front of the room, share their case of why their topic was the most important. And we had the whole crowd vote on what are the things you want us to follow up with? What are the things you want us to bring in expert speakers to talk more about? That led to our second public session, where we brought together people to talk about public-private partnerships. We brought in regional experts, statewide experts. We helped identify quick wins and how to improve process moving forward. We did a panel discussion with elected officials and developers, planning departments, and land use planners to really identify what are the opportunities and how can public sector and private sector work together to address these issues. Our third session was the psychology of workforce housing, the idea that you don't have to live here. We brought in someone by the name of Tiffany Manuel. She's a PhD, to talk about community development and affordable housing. This was a huge session. We had about 600 to 800 people at this session to really offer this evidence-based tools for reframing the discussion. And we followed it up with what was an intentionally provocative program called the NIMBY Jamboree, creating a healthy community through workforce housing. This was a day-and-a-half interactive program. We brought together public, private sector, architects, builders, landowners, elected officials. We did site tours of projects. And again, the name in NIMBY Jamboree was intentionally provocative and very effective to increase engagement. So as we activate this, coming out of those crowdsourced topics and community engagement, we really said we need to continue moving this forward. We can't just host these sessions and say we've accomplished something. So the NIMBY Jamboree was held in 2017. As I said, a day and a half. We brought in speakers from Washington, DC. We brought in folks, experts in this topic from around our region and around our state. That program had such good success, and we felt really good about moving this forward, that we then 2 years later it hosted the NIMBY Jamboree, and the YIMBY Jamboree rather, and the YIMBY, yes in my backyard. We wanted to take that intentionally provocative NIMBY word and make it positive. YIMBY, yes in my backyard. How do we do this? So we actually built it as part of the US Mountain Community Housing Summit. So we went from a day-and-a-half session in 2017 to a 3-day session in 2019, and brought industry leaders together from across the sectors. And we hosted this in the winter months and built in time for chairlift meetings on our ski mountains. And we had over 80 attendees from 26 different mountain communities, from Montana and Wyoming and California, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, coming together to share and discuss ideas and share case studies and examples on how we can get this done. So the NIMBY Jamboree led to the YIMBY Jamboree, again, positioning it intentionally provocative with the not in my backyard concept into the more positive of yes in my backyard. A quote here from elected officials, or a town manager in this case, community feedback, and again, I'm going to let you read this, but the idea of chambers being able to coalesce and convene and be the same center and advocate for your community, I thought this was really nice. And I think the biggest takeaway hear from one of our town managers is to provide, quote, political cover, unquote, for elected officials to make the best decision. Often in these types of environments, when it comes to housing, you have the folks who don't want housing because of traffic, because of density, because of whatever reason. And sometimes those elected officials, convened by and championed by the chamber, if you can bring people to speak to the positives and to the need, it does give them that political cover. I think that's something that could apply to chambers around the country. From a communication standpoint, our Workforce Housing Coalition, we really used a yes and approach. We focused on communicating in every way that we could, reinforcing the message of supporting our local economy, the need for housing to positively impact our community. We had email marketing, we had direct mail, website, microsite, emails, videos, an extensive public relations campaign around both the programs and the coalition as a whole. Again, with the idea of 3 related purposes: increase awareness of the housing issue for those who might not be aware, drive engagement and attendance at our events, and drive engagement with our advocacy networks. We built a Workforce Housing Coalition group. We built an advocacy email list. And again, this really ended in an 18-month period of just a local program issue to something that got expanded across 26 mountain communities and probably a half dozen different states around the West. Some of the videos, and I'm not going to play these videos, but rather just share. The one that just popped up and said it's age restricted was a mean tweets. For those familiar with the Jimmy Kimmel mean tweets, we did mean emails from NIMBYs, and it was some of the things that come into our inbox at the chamber and my inbox as the CEO. I would encourage you to Google that or reach out to me. I'd be happy to share it. It should be hyperlinked in the presentation that Susan shared as well. We got really great uptick on a lot of those videos. It helped us tell our story. Let's see. Some of the different tools, I talked about this, the tools and media coverage, websites and microsites and videos and events, and then public relations and media coverage with doing press releases, working with your local media to help tell your story. We received statewide coverage, we received regional coverage in different publications, certainly a lot of local coverage in our community. We're a 50,000 person community. We have a very good relationship with our media outlets, but there's hyperlinks within the presentation to all of these things that again build on the idea of the chamber's work and our effort with Housing Coalition that started as a how do we advocate and really manifested into how are we more than just an advocacy group, but how are we a group that gets things done and builds relationships and leverages that relationship capital in order to solve community problems and be a community problem solver. At the end of the day, that's, I think, what probably helped our application stand out. And it's something that we take very seriously at our chamber, is to be a chamber that helps solve community problems. That results in members wanting to join it. It results in high retention rates. It results in all the things that we measure at the chamber and at Vail Valley Partnership. From an evaluation standpoint, again, I'll let you read through this, but the idea that I think this was successful because of our engagement, because of our public relations, but more so because it was not a one-time event or program. This wasn't something where we just said, housing is an issue, we're gonna host an event. That's okay. We wanted it to be more. It ended up being more than we ever imagined in partnership with the U.S. the YIMBY Jamboree with the U.S. Mountain Community Housing Coalition. We also ended up building a task force that we've said we don't want to lose the momentum of these public events, but we also know we can't just host these events and do these things without starting to lose effectiveness and attendance and engagement. So we tapped a variety of folks around the community, including government planning staff, elected officials, developers, bankers, chamber, to serve on a 10-year commitment to serve on a housing task force. This group, again, is an outcome of the Housing Coalition in order to keep this on the radar. Again, we helped being the key word, 11 projects be approved that had some level of deed restriction, either a residency requirement or income restriction throughout multiple towns. We have 9 different communities in our county, in our region. So imagine it's not just one town and their elected officials and their planning and zoning department and their managers and everything else. It's 9 different communities that are all part of the larger regional workforce area that we needed to work with and bring together. And as I said, we had 0 projects approved in the years prior to us doubling down on this. As an outcome of this, advocacy in our member survey, advocacy was the most important aspect of chamber membership. When we ask, why are you a member of the chamber? The most important one that rose to the top was advocacy, more than networking events, more than chamber benefits or marketing benefits or connection, more than leadership programs or anything else, advocacy. And when we rate us on a score of 1 to 4 on being a champion for a stronger community, we're at 3.65. And we're at 3.38 on being a trusted convener of leaders and influencers. So very, very strong program. And other things have manifested out of our work with the Housing Coalition. Other things have been created. In the town of Vail, they created a deed restriction program to incentivize homeowners to put a deed restriction on their property. Avon, another one of our communities, did a very similar program called the Avon Mi Casa program. So we saw other programs come out of the work that we initiated and that we led. And what a great thing that is. And when you start to see others take your work and manifest it in different ways. A couple different pieces of material and promotional things that existed that relate to the Workforce Housing Coalition, and some member feedback here. I'm not going to spend a ton of time and read this to you, but this is just verbatim feedback that we hear from our members around housing and around advocacy work. And when we ask what issues are impacting, or just verbatim questions that we give people in our member survey and our workforce study, provide us feedback on what's going on in the county. And you see here, it's housing, it's housing, it's housing. Housing is a huge issue for us. It's one of the greatest challenges in order to get qualified candidates to come to our area. Housing is horrible, so housing. This last one I think is really explains the why and the advocacy work that we do through the Housing Coalition and through the Chamber. So at the end of the day, as we wrap up here, and before we take our Q&A, I think I'm about right on time with what we're allocated for today. What is it that the Chamber does, and what is it that the Chamber is? And the Chamber is collaboration. In our case, our mission statement is 2 words. It's leading collaboration. So we understand the importance of collaborating and building coalitions. How do we impact our community, and how do we position our Chamber as the place for collaboration to happen and to bring leaders together in order to get things done? Workforce housing and the Workforce Housing Coalition as manifested in the synopsis for the Chamber of the Year, is exactly that. That it was mission centric, it was mission driven. There was a lot of elbow grease and work that went behind it, and it really helped position our chamber as a leader in the community. And I think we were probably, hopefully, already viewed that way, but as you saw in some of the comments, it really did allow us to double down on that. So as we wrap up this webinar, and before we take the Q&A, I would encourage everybody taking the time to listen to this webinar to take the time to apply for Chamber of the Year. It's an honor to be eligible. It means that you're doing the right things through the dynamic chamber benchmarking and through the materials. Simply being eligible is an honor, but take this next step and apply for it. You'll learn a lot about your chamber. It will allow you to reflect on the good work you're doing, how you can position that, how you can maybe even do it even a little bit better. But it really is an honor. It does take some time to put together your application, and probably intentionally so for the team at ACCE. But I encourage everybody to go through the process. Take the time to do it. Go through it. It is meaningful, and it's an honor to be eligible. And it's, you know, as we wrap up here, it's an honor to be selected by the judges, because there's so many chambers doing such good work. It's just such an incredible honor, and we are humbled, and it means a lot to us at the Vail Valley Partnership and to our community that those efforts are recognized. So that wraps it up for the presentation and webinar. I've got my contact information here for you on the screen. Please feel free to reach out to me. You can call or email. You can find us on any of the social channels. Our website, vailvalleypartnership.com, has information on all of our programs. And if anyone has questions on the Chamber of the Year process, or as you think about what your synopsis and case studies might be, and how to present them, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to take some time and walk you through how we thought about it and how we positioned it, in hopes that that might help you as you go through the process.
Okay, well, thank you, Chris, and thank you so much for offering that assistance with respect to Chamber of the Year as well. We have some good questions here already, and folks, if you have questions, please go ahead and type them into the question box, and I will read them out to Chris. Our first one had to do with one of your original events that you had relating to your project, and it was who was invited to the Roundtable brainstorming session and how many people were invited.
Yeah, for the Roundtable, the first one that we did, we opened it to the public. So we did a press release. We worked with our towns and our county. We worked with the nonprofit community, Habitat for Humanity, the utilities, and everyone we could think of. And we had, at that very first session, about 150 people who attended that roundtable. We invited specifically personal invitations to our elected officials and developer community, and then the more widespread invitation went out to our email database and the towns and nonprofit lists within our community.
Okay. The next question is, how do you define the workforce housing demographic for your community? What % of the AMI does this include, and what is that annual income range?
Yeah, that's a great question for us, because we're a rural resort community, and we have a high propensity for second home ownership. In Vail, for example, almost 70 or more % of the homes are vacant second homes. Only 30% are occupied by residents, and that changes a little bit as you move further to the west away from the ski mountain. For us, we define workforce housing as up to 150% of area median income. So up to 150% of area median income, and our AMI is about $80,000 a year.
Okay, thank you. There's a couple questions on that, so thank you. Let me see here. How do you handle elected officials who have a NIMBYism voters and align themselves with NIMBYism?
Yeah, it is the crux of the challenge when you talk about housing and workforce housing. And I will share that in all the advocacy work that we have done across 9 different communities, there has not been a single project that hasn't had at least somebody coming to speak against it. And often more than somebody, a very well mobilized group of homeowners, of residents. And there are elected officials who align with that for whatever reason it might be, traffic or density or, fill in the blank. What we did is we received permission and authority, if you will, from our board to be intentionally provocative. So they charged us gave us permission to be intentionally provocative. Now, that doesn't mean being mean-spirited, and that doesn't mean necessarily being adversarial, but it does mean, how do you push the needle? So we try to meet with every elected official and outline our positions on an annual basis. So we have white papers that we share with them. We try to educate them, et cetera. But with specific regard to this, we printed hats that said YIMBY. They were bright orange fluorescent and bright green fluorescent hats that said YIMBY, yes, in my backyard. And what we did for all of these different town council meetings and county meetings and everything else is we would have our advocates in the audience with these bright orange and bright green fluorescent hats that said YIMBY. So even people who were not interested in speaking, the town council people could see people in the audience, in the room, with these hats, knowing that they aligned with our position to help these projects through. And I think that visual really made a big difference. And when we would have our advocates on the council, when people came to speak and were wearing a hat, our advocates would say, what does that hat mean? And then the person would say, it means yes, in my backyard, we support workforce housing, et cetera. So we really tried to have a little bit of fun with it and to really just show how much the silent majority existed through that idea of, and that manifests itself with calling an event the NIMBY Jamboree, but the fluorescent hats and the one-on-one meetings and the white papers probably more directly answers that question.
Okay, love it, love the hats. Related question, what resistance, if any, did you get from local housing professionals and organizations? How did you respond to, quote, who are you? We've been working on this for years, unquote.
Yeah, so in our case, Habitat for Humanity has a strong chapter here. The towns and our county have housing departments, but there hasn't been anyone working on this for years, and that was the problem. No one was bringing together all of these different groups, the developer community, the elected officials, the special districts, the nonprofits, et cetera, the financiers. So we were the first group to really help bring them together in that collaborative way. And if some of those groups did exist, I think the tactic would be very similar, but it would be to invite them to the table and say, what role can the chamber play? And certainly defer to their expertise and understand that the role the chamber can play might be as a convener, as a champion, as a catalyst. We're doing it on behalf of the community at large. We don't have a vested interest in housing. We have a vested interest in solving community problems, which happens to be housing, which is aligned with your challenge. So how do we work together?
Okay. What are some specific examples of the developer incentives you've been successful advocating for regarding the 11 projects, tax credits, impact fee waivers, a combination, etc.
Yeah, it's a combination of things, really. That includes having our county step up with funding for projects to buy down deed restrictions. The main one that's gotten the most momentum in our area is deed restrictions, and a deed restriction requiring residents to work 30 hours a week over the course of the year. So they have to live and work in Eagle County. They can't own other property. So it can't be an investment property. And that required towns and county to buy down deed restrictions for the developer. But we've also worked on incentives on tax credits, LIHTC tax credits. We've worked with our water districts and utilities on some of their payment requirements. So I think it's a community by community example on what that might be. Our approach is yes and. We want to do what works for the developer, what works for the residents, and what works for the communities themselves. Density bonuses. You know, there's one project specifically that we helped advocate and negotiate for the town to allow one level of building higher than the code accounted for. So the code had a height restriction of 3 stories, and we were able to work with and advocate for a 4th story. That 4th story is all deed restricted workforce housing. The rest is still free market. So it benefited the developer and it benefited the town, and we helped do that. So it really needs to be a localized, but having the mentality and the idea of yes and, I think helps move you through the process.
Okay. Can you give us Vail Valley's commute patterns, inbound, outbound commuters, and then the workforce living and working in Vail Valley?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so from a county standpoint, our county has some very real geographic challenges. We live in a mountain community where it's a very long, linear area that about a 40-mile stretch east to west, but only about 2 miles north to south because of mountains, right? It's hard to build on a mountain. So for us, and then we have part of our county, you have to drive through another county to get to the other part of our Eagle County area. Within that offshoot area, there's quite a bit of in and out commuting that takes place from a labor standpoint. For our area, the Eagle River Valley, the Vail Valley, where our primary focus is, our commuting pattern is up to 40 miles. We have people crossing mountain passes into Lake County or Summit County and having to come through to come into. So it's somewhere around 20% of our workforce commutes in from out of county, and the majority of the rest of our workforce travels upwards of 40 miles. The average commute being what for city folks will seem like nothing. The average commute in our area is about 22 minutes. But when you think of a 40-mile area, it's still a pretty big, significant deal when people are living that far away from their jobs.
Okay. And then finally, just a question about your organization. How many staff members do you have?
We have 7 full-time and 2 part-time employees. So yeah, part-time accounting, part-time program person, myself as the CEO, community development director, membership director, events and programs, marketing, etc.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Chris. Great work. Wonderful project. And thank you so much for the information. And thanks, everyone, for your great questions. Just a reminder that I will have this webinar posted on our webinar page by Monday, or more likely probably tomorrow. And along with Chris's presentation, he has lots of great links and information embedded. So I'll have both of those posted. And so look for those very shortly. Our next ACCE webinar will be on Tuesday, March 9th, and we're going to be presenting on Remote Work 2.0, engaging, managing, and motivating your work from home staff. This webinar will feature Bernie Dagenet, President and CEO of the Mainline Chamber of Commerce, and Lori Matson, President and CEO of the Tri-City Regional Chamber. They're both successfully leading productive and engaged remote teams. So we'll learn together how chamber culture and core values, along with the right kind of management, the right kind of tech support, can create organizational success for your work at home team as well as those in the office. So to register for that webinar, again, March 9th at 2 p.m. East Coast time, please check our event page. So that's it, everyone. Thank you. Thank you again, Chris, for presenting. Anyone who has questions about the Chamber of the Year program, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or to another ACCE team member. We'd be happy to have you apply. Hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon, and I will see you on the next ACC webinar.